The mysterious delivery. Jake sat on his couch, scrolling through his tablet. He was lonely. Ever since he had moved to this city, he had no friends, no family, and nothing to do after work. His apartment was quiet, too quiet. One day, he saw an ad online. Exotic pets for sale. Unique and rare species. The ad promised something special. A pet that was not found on Earth. Some kind of alien creature, but safe and legal. The website showed a small, fluffy creature with big eyes and glowing fur. It looked cute, like a mix between a cat and a fox. This will be perfect, Jake thought. Without thinking much, he placed the order. The website didn't ask for many details, just his name, address, and payment. It was strange, but he ignored the feeling. The unexpected arrival. 2 days later, late in the evening, a black delivery van stopped outside his apartment. The street was empty. The driver, wearing a dark uniform with no company logo, carried a large metal box to Jake's door. "Sign here," the driver said in a deep voice. Jake signed the digital pad. The driver handed him a small remote with a red button on it. "Press this to unlock the box," the driver said, then turned around and left quickly. Jake watched the van drive away, disappearing into the darkness. A strange feeling crawled over his skin. Something was off. He looked at the metal box. It was bigger than he expected, almost the size of a person. Why would a small pet need such a big container? His heart pounded as he pressed the red button. The shocking surprise. With a soft hiss, the box unlocked. Steam rose from the edges as the door slowly swung open. Jake expected a small, fluffy creature to jump out. But instead, a girl stepped out. She was tall, slim, and glowing faintly in the dim light. Her skin was smooth, with a soft blue tint. Her eyes were large, silver, and full of confusion. She had long, flowing white hair that shimmered like silk. Jake froze. His mind refused to understand what he was seeing. The girl stumbled forward, looking weak, as if she had been inside the box for too long. She grabbed the doorframe for support, breathing heavily. Jake's heart pounded in his chest. "Who are you?" he stammered. The girl looked at him, her silver eyes filled with fear and confusion. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, she made a soft sound, a mix between a whisper and a musical note. Jake stepped back, his breath quickening. This can't be right," he muttered. "I ordered a pet, not a person." The girl's hands trembled. She looked around the room, scanning everything as if she had never seen such a place before. Then she looked down at herself, as if realizing something was wrong. She touched her arms, her chest, her face, checking if she was real. Jake's fingers tightened around the remote. Was this some kind of mistake? A prank? A human trafficking crime? 1,000 thoughts rushed through his mind. He checked the box's interior. Inside, there were small blankets, a strange-looking bracelet, and a screen that showed alien symbols flashing in red. Something clicked in his brain. This wasn't a mistake. This was a deliberate delivery. Someone wanted him to have her. Fear and confusion. The girl suddenly staggered forward, clutching her stomach. She looked weak. Jake hesitated but reached out to help her. As soon as his fingers brushed against her arm, a strange energy passed between them. A static shock. The girl gasped and pulled away quickly. She stared at him, then at her own hands, then back at him. She seemed just as shocked as he was. Jake swallowed. "Can you understand me?" The girl blinked, tilting her head. She looked around, then slowly nodded, just a little. That was a relief. Jake took a deep breath. "Okay, but do you need water? Food?" She hesitated, then nodded again. Jake rushed to the kitchen, filling a glass with water. When he returned, she was watching everything carefully, her silver eyes scanning the room like a lost traveler in a new world. She took the glass from him and examined it as if she had never seen one before. Then, slowly, she sipped the water. For the first time, her body relaxed. Jake watched in silence. His mind raced with questions. Who was she? Why was she sent to him? Where was the pet he ordered? Was she in danger? Was he in danger? His phone buzzed. A message. He picked it up, but his stomach dropped when he saw the words on the screen. Do not let her go. They are coming for her. Jake's breath caught in his throat. His hands went cold. He looked at the girl. She was staring at him, her silver eyes filled with fear and silent pleading. Somewhere outside, the sound of an approaching vehicle echoed through the empty street. Something was very, very wrong. Stranger in my house. The night was heavy with silence. The only sound was the quiet hum of the city outside. Jake stood frozen, staring at the message on his phone. Do not let her go. They are coming for her. His pulse quickened. His fingers tightened around the phone. Who had sent this? How did they know about the girl? A cold shiver ran down his spine as he turned to look at her. She was still standing there, barefoot on his living room floor, her silver eyes scanning the room. She seemed more alert now, less dizzy. Her gaze flickered to his phone, then back to him, as if she understood something had changed. Jake licked his dry lips. He needed answers. But where would he even begin? The unspoken barrier. Jake took a cautious step forward. The girl didn't move. He pointed to himself. Jake. She blinked. Then, slowly, she raised a hand to her chest. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. She tried again, her expression turning frustrated. Jake realized she was struggling to speak his language. He took a different approach. He pointed at his chest again. Jake, he repeated. Then, he gestured toward her with an expectant look. She hesitated, then slowly placed her fingers over her heart. Kai. Her voice was soft, almost musical, like the wind passing through chimes. Kai. Jake repeated, testing the name on his tongue. She nodded slightly. At least now, she wasn't just the girl. Signs of intelligence. Jake's mind was racing. She wasn't just some wild, scared creature. She was intelligent. She understood things, even if communication was difficult. But why had she been delivered in a metal box like a pet? And who was trying to take her back? Kay's gaze flickered toward the window. The faint sound of an engine rumbled in the distance, making her visibly tense. Jake followed her line of sight and felt a knot tighten in his stomach. A black van had stopped across the street. It was the same van that had delivered her. His heart pounded. What do they want? Instinct took over. He quickly walked to the window and yanked the curtains shut. Kai looked at him, uncertainty in her glowing silver eyes. He raised a hand, motioning for her to stay quiet. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, knock, knock, knock. Jake felt his stomach drop. Someone was at his door. The visitors. The knocking wasn't urgent. It was slow, controlled, like the person outside knew he was inside and was waiting for him to answer. Jake swallowed hard. He turned to Kai and pointed toward the hallway. Hide, he whispered. She hesitated, her eyes full of questions, but when the knocking came again, louder this time, she moved, slipping into the shadows of the hallway like a ghost. Jake took a deep breath and opened the door just a crack. A man stood outside. Tall, broad shoulders, dressed in black. No company logo. No ID badge. Just a blank stare. Mr. Collins? The man asked, his voice polite but hollow. Jake forced a casual expression. Yeah. The man gave a tight smile. We're here for a recent delivery. Jake's throat dried. Delivery. He played dumb. The man's eyes were sharp, studying him closely. We believe you received something, by mistake. Jake gripped the edge of the door. He knew that if he admitted anything, Kai was gone. And something deep inside told him, If she left with these people, she wasn't coming back. I don't know what you're talking about, he said firmly. The man's smile didn't fade. Let's not make this difficult, Mr. Collins. Just return the package. Jake's stomach twisted. They were calling her a package. A living, breathing person. Something inside him snapped. He straightened his shoulders. Sorry, but I think you got the wrong guy. The man's polite expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted. A small movement, a silent threat. Then he reached into his coat pocket. Jake's breath caught. A weapon, a device. But before anything could happen, a sudden noise exploded from inside the apartment. A shattering sound, like glass breaking. The man's eyes flickered past Jake. Jake turned his head, just for a second. Big mistake. The man lunged forward, pushing the door open with full force. Jake staggered back just as another dark figure moved from behind the first. They were coming inside. The flight instinct. But before they could get far, something blurred past Jake, fast and graceful. Kai. She moved with unnatural speed, her bare feet barely making a sound on the floor. In her hands was a broken glass bottle, its jagged edges glowing faintly with some strange energy. Jake barely had time to react. She struck. The sharp edge of the bottle slashed across the second man's arm. He grunted in pain, stumbling back. The first man turned, reaching for something under his coat, but Kai was already moving again. She grabbed Jake's wrist and ran. No words, no hesitation, just pure instinct. Jake's mind barely kept up with his body as they bolted toward the back door. Behind them, the first man shouted, "Stop them!" Too late. Kai yanked the back door open, dragging Jake into the cold night. They ran. Down the alley. Across the empty street, their feet hitting the pavement, their breaths sharp and quick. Jake didn't ask where they were going, because somehow he knew, if they stopped now, they wouldn't get a second chance. Uncovering the truth. The cold night air bit into Jake's skin as he ran, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Kai's grip on his wrist was firm, almost unnaturally strong. She led him through the dark streets like she knew exactly where to go. Behind them, the black-clad men were in pursuit. Jake's heartbeat pounded in his ears. His lungs burned. His legs felt heavy. Who were these people? Why were they chasing them? Kai suddenly pulled him toward a narrow alleyway. They barely slipped inside before a black van sped past the street. The men had lost them. For now. Jake bent over, hands on his knees, trying to catch his breath. Okay, what the hell is going on? Kai didn't answer. She pressed her back against the alley wall, peeking out to check if the men were gone. Her silver eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Jake exhaled and looked at her properly for the first time since they had escaped. Her skin had a strange shimmer, almost like the surface of water under moonlight. Her hair was silver white, catching even the faintest light. Her eyes, they weren't just silver. They had layers, like swirling galaxies. She wasn't human. She wasn't just an alien. She was something more, and she had been delivered to his doorstep like a pet. I need answers, Jake said, standing straight. Kai hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, she lifted her hand and touched the bracelet on her wrist. It was a sleek metal band with glowing blue symbols. She pressed something on its surface, and suddenly, a holographic screen appeared in front of them. Jake's breath hitched. He had seen holograms before. This was not normal technology. It was far beyond anything Earth had. The screen displayed text in an unknown language, glowing softly in the night. Kai scrolled through it quickly, her fingers moving fast. Then she paused, staring at one section. She turned to Jake and pointed at the screen. Jake squinted, trying to make sense of the alien symbols. But before he could ask anything, the screen translated itself. His eyes widened as he read the words. Experiment 247. Classified asset. Status. Escaped. Warning. Do note ALO to FL into NMI hands. Jake's blood ran cold. What the hell does this mean? He muttered. Kai pointed at the word experiment. Then she pointed at herself. Jake's stomach twisted. No way, he whispered. Kai wasn't just an alien. She was a lab experiment. Created, designed, or maybe engineered. And whoever had been keeping her wanted her back. The hidden past. Kai looked away, her expression tense. She pressed a few more symbols on the holographic screen. The text changed again. This time, a video played. Jake saw a dark laboratory, cold metal walls, blinking lights, giant tanks filled with liquid. And inside those tanks, people. Or at least, beings that looked similar to humans. Floating, sleeping, trapped. Jake swallowed hard. His eyes darted to Kai. She stood still, watching the video without emotion, but her hands clenched into fists. The video zoomed in on one of the tanks. A girl with silver hair and glowing eyes floated inside, her arms limp, her face peaceful yet lifeless. It was Kai. Jake's chest tightened. They had kept her in a tank. Like an experiment. Like a prisoner. He glanced back at the screen as the video continued. Scientists in dark suits stood around, talking. The hologram translated their words. Project Nebula. The perfect hybrid. Her DNA holds the key to universal evolution. We must ensure she does not escape. Jake's breath caught. Kai wasn't just some random alien girl. She was part of something bigger. Her DNA was valuable and dangerous. Jake suddenly understood why the men had called her a package. She wasn't a person to them. She was a project. Something inside him burned with anger. But before he could say anything, Kai suddenly tensed. Her head snapped toward the alley entrance. Jake's stomach dropped. The men were back. The escape plan. Kai moved first. She grabbed Jake's arm and pulled him deeper into the alley. The sound of heavy boots echoed behind them. Jake's mind raced. They couldn't run forever. They needed a place to hide. Or fight. Kai glanced up. Rooftop. Jake followed her gaze. The buildings were tall, but not impossible to climb. He barely had time to react before Kai leaped. Not climbed. Leaped. She pushed off the ground with unnatural strength, grabbing onto a fire escape ladder above them. Jake's jaw dropped. Are you kidding me? He hissed. Kai looked down at him, motioning for him to follow. Jake groaned. Fine. He jumped, barely catching the ladder. He scrambled up as fast as he could. Behind them, the men shouted. They're going up. One of them raised a gun-like device, but before he could fire, Kai flicked her wrist. A small glowing dagger-like blade extended from her bracelet. In one swift motion, she threw it. The blade sliced through the gun's barrel, breaking it apart. Jake's eyes widened. Kai was more than just strong. She was a fighter. They'd reached the rooftop. Kai pulled him up just as a red targeting light flashed across her back. A sniper. Jake's instincts kicked in. He tackled Kai down just as the shot fired. A bolt of energy sizzled past where her head had been. They rolled onto the rooftop, gasping for breath. Kai's expression was serious now. She knew this wouldn't stop. They weren't just running anymore. They were being hunted. And Jake had just thrown himself into something much bigger than he had ever imagined. The hidden message. The rooftop wind howled around them. Jake and Kai lay flat against the cold concrete, their breaths shallow. Somewhere below, the sound of boots rushed through the alley. The men were still searching for them. Jake's mind was racing. Everything had changed in just a few hours. He had ordered a pet. Instead, he got a living, breathing alien girl. She wasn't just an alien. She was an experiment. And now, they were being hunted. Kai stayed motionless, her silver eyes scanning the rooftops around them. The sniper who had almost killed her was still out there. Jake swallowed hard. We can't stay here. Kai nodded. She pointed toward another building. A narrow gap separated them from the next rooftop. Jake's stomach twisted. "You want us to jump that?" Kay didn't respond. She simply stood up and ran. Jake barely had time to react before she leaped, a perfect, graceful arc over the gap. She landed silently on the other side. Jake cursed. "You've got to be kidding me." Behind him, voices were getting closer. Jake backed up, took a deep breath, and ran. The jump felt like forever. For a second, he was weightless. Then his foot hit the ledge, and he tumbled forward. Kai grabbed his arm, steadying him. "Thanks," he gasped. She just nodded and kept moving. They needed to disappear. Fast. The safe house. 10 minutes later, they were inside an abandoned apartment complex on the edge of the city. The place was dark, dust-covered, and smelled like rust. Jake locked the door behind them. He pressed his back against it, exhaling sharply. "Okay," he said between breaths. "We need a plan." Kai didn't respond. Instead, she pulled up her holographic screen again. Jake moved closer, watching. The screen flickered with symbols, alien text shifting too fast for him to read. Then suddenly, the words translated. His heart skipped a beat. "They will not stop. You are in danger. There is only one way to end this. Find the Ark." Jake's eyebrows furrowed. The Ark. Kai stared at the words, her face unreadable. Jake crossed his arms. "What the hell does that mean?" Kai turned to him, hesitant, then reached up and slowly pulled back her hair. Jake's breath caught. On the back of her neck, hidden beneath her silver strands, was a symbol. A glowing mark, pulsing faintly with light. It wasn't just a tattoo. It was moving. Jake stepped closer, eyes wide. "What is that?" Kai touched the mark, then pressed a button on her bracelet. A holographic screen changed again. This time, a map appeared. A star chart with glowing points of light. At the center of the map, one location pulsed in red. Jake recognized the shape of a planet. It was Earth. His stomach tightened. "The Ark is here." Kai nodded. Jake ran a hand through his hair. "So let me get this straight. You were created in a lab. You escaped. And now, you're looking for some secret thing called the Ark." Kai hesitated, then nodded again. Jake exhaled sharply. "And let me guess, those guys chasing us. They want it too." Kay's expression darkened. She lifted her hand and made a fist. Jake didn't need words to understand what she meant. If those men found the Ark first, everything was over. The message. Jake rubbed his temples. "All right, where is this thing? How do we find it?" Kai tapped the holographic screen. The map zoomed in, showing the specific location on Earth. Jake's jaw clenched. It was only a few hundred miles away. They could get there, if they survived long enough. Kay's gaze sharpened. She turned off the hologram and stood up. She was ready to move. Jake groaned. "God, I miss my boring life." But deep down, he knew there was no going back. They had to find the Ark, or die trying. The hunters arrive. The abandoned apartment was silent except for the soft hum of Kay's holographic map fading away. Jake sat against the wall, staring at the last location that had been displayed. The Ark was on Earth. Somewhere out there, buried or hidden, was something so valuable, so dangerous that powerful people were willing to hunt them down to get it. He exhaled sharply. "Okay, so how do we get there?" Kai turned, her silver eyes thoughtful. She moved toward the window and peeked out into the dark streets below. The city was alive, neon lights flickering against rain-soaked sidewalks, but something felt off. She pulled back quickly. Jake tensed. "What? What did you see?" Kai raised her fingers, holding up two. Then she pointed down toward the street. Jake moved carefully, glancing through a crack in the blinds. His stomach dropped. 2 black vans had parked near the building, the same ones from before. The same people hunting them. Shit, Jake whispered. He turned to Kai. How did they find us? Kai tapped the bracelet on her wrist, her face serious. Jake frowned. You think they tracked you? She gave a small nod. Then she grabbed his hand and yanked off his watch. What the hell? She threw it against the wall. The watch shattered, revealing a tiny blinking red light inside. Jake's mouth went dry. They had been tracking him. He had ordered her, after all. They must have bugged his purchase, his address, his devices, everything. Kai stepped back, scanning the room. They needed a new exit. But before either of them could move, a thunderous crash shook the walls. Jake whipped around. The front door burst open, the lock ripping apart as 3 men in black tactical gear stormed inside. The attack begins. Kai moved first. She spun, grabbing Jake by the shirt and throwing him backward, just as bullets ripped through the air. The gunmen weren't using normal bullets. The rounds glowed, energy shots designed to incapacitate, not kill. They wanted Kai alive. Jake hit the floor hard, rolling behind an old couch for cover. His ears rang from the blast. Kai didn't stop moving. She ducked low, her bracelet flickering, and a thin, glowing energy blade extended from her wrist. One of the gunmen aimed at her, too slow. Kai darted forward, her blade slicing through his weapon. Sparks flew. The man stumbled back, cursing. Jake saw his chance. He grabbed a broken pipe lying on the floor and swung it. The second gunman barely turned in time before Jake cracked it against his helmet. The man fell back, dazed. The third attacker raised his weapon. Kai was already there. She leaped, twisting in midair, and kicked him in the chest. The force sent him crashing through a table. For a moment, everything was still. Then, a mechanical voice echoed through the building. "Team Dewanen, send reinforcements." Jake's pulse spiked. "More are coming," he panted. Kai grabbed his wrist. They had to run. The chase through the city. They bolted down the hallway. More footsteps thundered up the stairs. Kai turned sharply, leading him to a maintenance door. She kicked it open, revealing a metal fire escape. The night air was cold, the neon city glowing beneath them. Jake didn't hesitate. He climbed over the railing and jumped down onto the fire escape. Kai landed next to him effortlessly. From the rooftop, a red targeting laser flickered. Jake's eyes widened. Sniper. Kai shoved him just in time. A pulse shot exploded where he had been standing, blowing a hole through the railing. They kept moving, descending the fire escape as fast as they could. Below, a black van skidded to a stop. More men poured out. Jake's mind raced. No way out. No time. Then he saw it. A motorcycle parked just beside the alley. He turned to Kai. "Can you drive?" She tilted her head, confused. Jake groaned. "Great." They hit the ground level, and Jake sprinted toward the bike. He grabbed the helmet, hot-wired the ignition, and the engine roared to life. Kai jumped on behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Hold on." The tires screeched against the pavement as Jake tore down the street. The pursuit begins. The black vans roared after them, headlights blinding in the dark streets. Jake swerved hard, dodging between cars. The wind whipped past his face. Kai turned her head, watching the pursuers. Her bracelet activated, and she raised her arm. A small metal disc launched from her wrist and exploded under one of the vans. The vehicle flipped, crashing sideways into a row of parked cars. Jake whooped. Nice. But there was still one more van. The city lights blurred as Jake gunned the accelerator, weaving through traffic. A tunnel loomed ahead. Jake gritted his teeth. This is gonna be close. Kai tightened her grip. The van was right behind them. The gunner leaned out of the window, taking aim. Jake saw the tunnel entrance and turned sharply at the last second. The motorcycle veered off the main road, cutting into a narrow side alley. The black van didn't turn in time. It slammed into the tunnel wall, crumpling into flames. Jake didn't stop. They kept riding, disappearing into the dark streets. The aftermath. Minutes later, the city was far behind them. Jake finally slowed the bike, pulling into an empty parking lot. His hands were shaking. Kai slid off first, checking her surroundings. Jake exhaled sharply, rubbing his face. Okay. That was insane. Kai simply nodded, as if this was normal for her. Jake leaned against the bike. We're gonna die if we keep running like this. Kai turned to him. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small metal key. Jake frowned. What's that? She pointed toward a dark warehouse nearby. Jake followed her gaze. In the distance, a faint blue glow flickered inside. His pulse quickened. The Ark, he whispered. Kai nodded. Jake took a deep breath. Everything had led them here. And now, it was time to find the truth. The grand reveal. Jake felt the cold night air biting at his skin as he and Kai approached the dimly lit warehouse. The distant sound of city traffic had faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. The only light was the blue glow coming from the building's cracked windows. Something about it felt off. Kai didn't seem bothered. She walked toward the large metal door without hesitation, her steps quick and sure. No fear, no pause. Jake swallowed hard, his heart hammering in his chest. Is this it, the Ark? He asked, though his voice barely rose above a whisper. Kai nodded. Her silvery eyes glimmered in the darkness. She took a deep breath, then slid the small metal key into a lock on the door. With a soft click, the door creaked open. Inside, the air was thick, musty with age, and the smell of oiled machinery filled the space. The warehouse stretched far beyond what Jake could see at first. There was a faint hum in the air. Something powered up. Jake stepped inside, his feet making no sound on the cold concrete floor. Kai was already ahead, walking confidently through the dark expanse, her hand brushing lightly against the walls. The lights flickered on one by one as they moved deeper into the warehouse, revealing rows of strange equipment covered in tarps. But there was something else, something that made Jake's breath catch. There, in the center of the room, was a large metallic structure, towering, almost monolithic. It was shaped like a giant obelisk, with intricate symbols etched across its surface. The whole thing seemed to pulse, faintly glowing with that same blue light that had led them here. It was as if the building itself was alive, and the Ark was the heart of it all. Jake took a cautious step forward, his eyes widening. What is that? Kai stopped, standing just a few feet from it. She turned to Jake, her silver eyes locked on his. There was no fear in her gaze, only determination. This is the Ark, she said softly. Her voice seemed distant, almost as if she were speaking to herself. It's not just a weapon. It's a repository. A repository, Jake repeated, confused. For what? Her eyes flickered to the symbols on the obelisk. For knowledge. For everything we were meant to be. Everything my people were supposed to be. Jake's stomach twisted. Your people? Kai nodded. Before we were made into experiments. Before we were hunted. There was another version of us. She looked at the Ark, her eyes filled with something like longing. This was meant to bring us to the next stage. To evolve. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. You mean, it was meant to make your species stronger? Kai interrupted, stepping closer to the Ark. The Ark holds our genetic map, our history, our evolution. Everything that was lost. It's the key to our survival, to rebuilding what was taken from us. Jake didn't speak for a long moment. The weight of her words hung in the air, and everything started to make more sense. Kai had been created, designed to be a perfect hybrid, a key to unlocking something far greater than just her existence. But why had her creators hidden all of this? And why was it on Earth? Just then, a loud clanking noise echoed from behind them. Jake's heart leaped into his throat. The hunters were here. Kai spun around, her posture instantly changing. She no longer seemed like the uncertain girl Jake had met in his apartment. In that instant, she became something else, something ancient, with a quiet power radiating from her. "I knew they would follow us," she said, her voice steady but low. "They're here to destroy it. To destroy me." Jake didn't waste a second. He grabbed her arm. "We have to move. Now." They ran toward the back of the warehouse, their footsteps echoing through the empty space. But the sound of boots growing closer made it clear. The hunters weren't far behind. Suddenly, a flash of light from the far side of the room caught Jake's attention. "No, stop them," came a voice from the shadows. It was one of the men from the black vans, their leader. Kay's eyes locked onto the door. There's only one way to protect the Ark now. Without warning, she pushed Jake forward, her grip tightening on his arm. "Go. I'll hold them off." Jake's mind raced. "Wait, what do you mean hold them off?" "No." But Kay didn't listen. She stepped toward the Ark and, with a single motion, slammed her fist against the glowing surface. The entire warehouse shuddered. A low hum filled the air, and the Ark's light blazed brighter than ever before, shooting up like a beacon. Jake froze, staring at the pulsating light, his heart in his throat. "What are you doing?" he shouted. "I'm activating it," she replied, her voice tinged with urgency. "The Ark can protect itself. It can stop them, but only for a short time. You need to go. Now." Before Jake could argue, the sound of footsteps grew louder, then the heavy clatter of weapons being drawn. "Now, Jake," Kai commanded, her eyes blazing with resolve. He didn't think twice. His legs moved on their own, carrying him toward the back exit of the warehouse. But as he ran, something deep inside his chest twisted. He didn't want to leave her. Kai wasn't just some alien girl anymore. She was more. She was his ally. His only ally. He reached the door, his fingers barely touching the handle, when a blast rang out behind him, followed by a deafening roar of energy. Jake's breath caught. Was she okay? He forced the door open and sprinted into the alley, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. He couldn't let her face them alone. His feet carried him down the dark streets, his thoughts filled with a single mission: get the Ark and Kai to safety, no matter the cost. The final escape. The streets of the city were quiet, almost too quiet. Jake's feet pounded against the asphalt, adrenaline pumping through his veins. His mind was still racing, full of the images of the Ark's power, the energy blast Kai had unleashed, and her final command for him to run. Run. He had barely gotten a step out of the warehouse before the door slammed shut behind him. The last thing he had seen was the glow from the Ark, brighter than the stars, as it hummed with life. Kai was still inside. She was facing them alone. The hunters wouldn't stop. They wanted her. And Jake. He had no choice now but to get the Ark back and get Kai back. He wouldn't leave her to face them alone. His breath was coming in ragged gasps as he reached the corner, glancing back over his shoulder. The soft hum of the energy blast was still in his ears, making it feel like the ground beneath him was trembling with the power of whatever Kai had activated. Would it be enough? But before he could make another move, a sudden explosion rocked the street behind him. He spun around, heart skipping a beat. There, in the distance, was a massive plume of smoke and fire rising into the sky. The warehouse was in flames. The explosion had come from the Ark. Jake's stomach twisted. His mind screamed at him, urging him to turn back, but his legs moved on their own, carrying him farther away from the chaos. He couldn't turn back. He was on his own now. He couldn't risk being caught. Jake reached into his jacket pocket, feeling the cold metal of the key Kai had given him. It was his only clue to what was really going on, and the only chance he had to stop the men who were after them. But where was it? Where had the key led them? He didn't have time to question his next move. He sprinted down the alley and into an abandoned subway entrance. His mind wasn't focused on what lay ahead, only on what had been left behind. Kai, the Ark, the men chasing them. The fate of everything now resting on what he could do next. The hidden truth. The subway was a mess of rusted tracks and dilapidated signs. It seemed like the perfect place to hide, to lay low for just a while longer. Jake slowed his pace, breathing deeply as the tunnel stretched out before him. He had to think. Just then, he heard it. Footsteps. The sound of shoes on concrete, growing louder by the second. Jake instinctively pressed himself against the wall, crouching low in the shadows. The footsteps grew louder, almost deafening now. They were closing in. He looked around. There was no other way out. He would have to take a chance. The sound stopped. Jake held his breath. His pulse thundered in his ears, but the footsteps had stopped. Whoever they were looking for him. He had to wait it out. And then there it was. A voice. "We know you're here," the voice called, smooth and almost too calm. It echoed through the subway tunnel. "You can't run forever. We have the technology to find you. We have all the time in the world." Jake's heart skipped a beat. The voice was cold, methodical, a hunter. But Jake had no intention of becoming their prey. The plan. Taking a deep breath, he reached into his jacket and pulled out the metal key Kai had entrusted to him. In the faint light, it gleamed like a beacon of hope. He didn't know what it would unlock, but it had to lead somewhere. It was the last piece of the puzzle. The echoing footsteps were getting closer, and Jake's fingers fumbled with the key as he scrambled through the shadows, trying to find some hidden mechanism, anything to buy him time. Suddenly, the wall to his right shifted. It wasn't just a normal wall. It was a sliding panel, and behind it was a narrow staircase descending into darkness. With no other choice, Jake rushed toward it, sliding the key into a hidden block. The door clicked open. His breath caught in his throat. He glanced over his shoulder one last time. He could hear the faint whisper of movement, but the hunters hadn't found him yet. With a quick glance, Jake stepped into the dark stairwell. The door slammed shut behind him. Down, deeper into the unknown. He descended the narrow staircase, gripping the key tightly in his hand. The deeper he went, the more strange energy seemed to radiate from the walls, almost as if the very building itself were alive. The staircase finally opened into a large chamber, a hidden underground facility. And in the center of the room there it was. The Ark, the very object that had changed everything. Jake took in the sight of it. A massive black structure, smooth and sleek, unlike anything he had ever seen. But it wasn't just a machine. It was a gateway, an entrance to something bigger. The glowing blue light still emanated from it, pulsing rhythmically. His mind raced as he remembered everything Kai had told him. This Ark wasn't just technology. It was the key to everything. A weapon, a relic, the future. As Jake approached the Ark, he felt the rush of energy from it. His fingers brushed the surface, and the light flickered once, then flared brightly. The wall in front of him shifted, revealing a new passage, a tunnel leading deeper into the earth. The very foundation of the Ark seemed to open up before him. It was like it was waiting for him, as though he was the one chosen to carry it forward. But what was waiting beyond? Was it a trap, or was this the real key to stopping the hunters forever? With only a split second to decide, Jake stepped into the tunnel. The shadows closed in behind him. He didn't know what would happen next, but he was certain of one thing. The world was about to change.